My husband called saying it's over. Then he coldly told me to only speak to his lawyer. Megan's mornings were always the same. The soft hum of the coffee maker filled the tiny kitchen of their modest home, blending with the faint chirping of birds outside the window. She moved methodically, pouring coffee into two mismatched mugs, one for herself, one for David, who was usually still upstairs when she prepared them. Their little house in the outskirts of a small American town wasn't much, but to Megan, it was home, a place where her quiet dreams were nestled alongside her husband's calm presence. Megan wasn't a woman of grand ambitions or flamboyant gestures. She was humble, kind-hearted, and deeply devoted. The day had begun like any other, with the morning sunlight streaming through sheer curtains, dust motes floating lazily in its golden path. Megan's hands, calloused and worn from years of working part-time cleaning houses and managing her modest craft business on the side, trembled slightly as she clutched the steaming mug, distracted by a restless feeling she couldn't quite place. The hum of the phone in the living room jolted her out of the silence. She glanced at the blinking screen with a sinking heart. The caller ID read David. He must have called back again, she thought, recalling the tense conversation they'd had the night before about bills and her request for a little more help with household expenses. Tentatively, Megan crossed the creaky floorboards and answered. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, steady, but underneath lingered a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd come around. On the other end, David's voice was unmistakably distant, colder than the autumn morning air, pressing against the frost-kissed window panes. "It's over," he said, each word slicing through the small room like shards of broken glass. There was no preamble, no explanation, just a stark finality that made Megan's throat tighten painfully. For a moment, her breath caught. Her mind raced to grasp the weight of what she'd just heard. "Why? David, what do you mean it's over?" she pleaded, her voice trembling, a mixture of disbelief and desperation seeping through every syllable. But there was no answer. Only the coldness in his tone grew more pronounced, his next words shaking her to her core. "Don't call me anymore. If you want anything, talk to my lawyer." The line went dead before Megan could gather the strength to respond. She stood still, the mug slipping from her fingers and shattering against the wooden floor, its ceramic shards sprawling like the sudden fragmentation of her life. Around her, the shutters rattled lightly in the wind, but inside Megan, a storm of confusion, humiliation, and heartbreak raged. For years, she'd believed in the quiet partnership they shared, the unspoken promises held in their everyday routines. Now, those promises crumbled into dust. The thought that he had planned this brutal, cutting final blow, without even a hint of a warning, gnawed at her. How could the man she married, whose eyes she once trusted, reduce her to this? A stranger sidelined by silence and legal distance. The neighbors might see her waddling toward her mailbox later, shoulders shrugged and face pale, but they wouldn't hear the screeching ache in her chest or the whispers of humiliation echoing inside. Her heart pounded, hot tears springing to the surface despite herself, threatening to spill. But even amid the shock and devastation, a quiet question stirred deep inside. Who would she be without him? As she sank to the worn couch, the weight of isolation settled over her. Yet, beneath that suffocating heaviness, a small ember glowed, a fragile spark that might one day ignite into something stronger. Could Megan find the courage to rise from this breaking point? Could she reclaim the voice David wanted to silence? In an instant, her world tilted violently. But somewhere between the broken coffee mug and the cold phone line, Megan's story was only just beginning. Have you ever faced a moment when someone you trusted suddenly erased your world? How did you find your way back? The days that followed the call were like a shadow stretching across Megan's life, distant and suffocating at the same time. The vibrant morning light that once brought her comfort now filtered through the same window in a cold, indifferent way, reminding her of the sting in David's voice. She felt stripped bare, exposed to the harsh judgment of a world that refused to pause and understand. At the grocery store, whispers behind her back prickled at her skin, and she could see the quick glances exchanged by the older women who once greeted her with warm smiles. "Did you hear? David ended it over the phone," one murmur sounded as she passed. The words pierced deeper than any confrontation. At home, the space David once filled seemed cavernous and empty, taunting her with distance. His belongings were still there, neat and untouched, as if waiting for some invisible moment when he might return. But she knew, she felt it all too clearly, that her place had been erased, replaced by silence and cold instructions. The lawyer, a distant man with a face carved out of stone, became the only connection between her and the man she loved, or thought she loved. When she called David, after the first shock passed, desperation choking her words, the reply was always the same: "Talk to my lawyer." His decrees weren't delivered personally anymore. They came through impersonal intermediaries, legal notices with jargon too complicated, demanding her silence and compliance. Megan's heart twisted in the solitude of the night, the weight of the ordeal pressing her to the floorboards of her own shame. Friends she thought would stand by her slowly stepped away, unsure how to navigate the storm of scandal and gossip. Their absence was a cold reminder that sometimes even the closest people retreat when faced with complicated pain. She spent hours pacing the cramped living room, whispering the fragments of the conversation over and over, like a mantra or a curse. "It's over." The phrase repeated in her mind, a relentless echo that refused to fade. She searched her own reflection in the cracked mirror above the dresser, her tired eyes framed by a face that seemed both familiar and foreign. Was this woman still herself? Or had the coldness of David's finality frozen her into someone unrecognizable? Doubt gnawed relentlessly at the edges of her resolve. Had she ignored the signs, missed the warning flags in the late nights, the sudden silences? How could she have been so blind? Her emotions tumbled uncontrollably, rage at being discarded like an old coat, humiliation broadcast silently to all who knew them. Sorrow from knowing the man she'd shared her life with had turned his back without ceremony or compassion. Yet amidst the chaos of her emotions, a flicker of stubborn defiance started to kindle. Megan realized she wasn't the one who ended this. He was. And if this was the hand she was dealt, she'd learned to play the game differently. One evening, while sitting by the window, Megan noticed Mrs. Carter, an elderly neighbor who had often smiled warmly at her, but had remained silent since the news broke. To Megan's surprise, Mrs. Carter knocked softly and entered with a basket of fresh-baked pies and an encouraging smile. "You don't have to face this alone," she said gently. "Sometimes life breaks us, so we find pieces we never knew existed." The gesture, simple but profound, lifted a crack in the walls Megan had built around her suffering. She was not invisible, even if David had tried to make her so. And so, slowly as the autumn leaves drifted from the trees outside and settled in golden heaps, Megan began gathering the scattered remnants of herself. But the question that haunted her nights remained. What secrets was David hiding? What shadows lay beneath his cold rejection? And most importantly, would Megan find the strength to uncover them? These thoughts gnawed at her, intertwining with the growing tension that something far worse than abandonment awaited her discovery. It was a silence pregnant with lies and a loneliness that threatened to swallow her whole. Have you ever felt cast aside and left to face a storm alone, only to find unexpected kindness breathing hope back into your heart? How did you navigate the betrayal and rise despite it? Day after day, Megan wrestled with the harsh reality she'd been thrust into. The initial shock of rejection had evolved into a deep, gnawing ache, one that sapped her strength and blurred the line between hope and despair. She spent countless nights alone, clutching old photographs and whispered memories, holding on to fragments of a life that now felt shattered beyond repair. Her once hopeful eyes grew dull, clouded with the weight of uncertainty and self-doubt. Each morning, the routine that had once been comforting now felt suffocating, a cruel reminder of his absence. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by the soft tick of the aging clock on the wall and the faint rustle of wind stirring the porch curtains. Megan found herself caught in a tumultuous swirl of emotions. Loneliness pressing in relentlessly, the sting of humiliation from public whispers, a frustrated anger towards David's coldness, and a suffocating fear that she might never reclaim the life that had been stolen from her so abruptly. She wanted to scream to the world that she was more than the woman he dismissed, more than the broken wife of a man quick to erase their years together. But the words caught in her throat. Friends had become scarce, carefully tiptoeing around the subject or simply drifting away. Megan realized that the judgment she felt was not from strangers alone, but from those she once trusted most. Vulnerability felt like a trap, a chasm that could swallow her whole if she didn't stay guarded. The pressure mounted when David's lawyer sent the first letter, a clinical briefing of the divorce proceedings buried in cold, legal jargon. The letter painted a picture of Megan as an uncooperative partner, someone who needed boundaries set carefully. The implications were clear. She was to be sidelined, denied influence, and forced into submission. Megan's heart buckled under the weight of the accusations she knew were false, yet felt powerless to deny. She sat at the cramped kitchen table, head in her hands, overwhelmed by the steep hill she had to climb. But nestled in this bleakness was a fragile thread of hope. One afternoon, as Megan attended a local community support group for women recently separated, she met Claire, a fiery, compassionate woman who had endured a similar betrayal years before. Claire's stories of struggle and eventual triumph felt like a lifeline thrown across the turbulent waters of Megan's despair. "You're stronger than you realize," Claire told her, eyes steady and kind. "Pain doesn't have to be the end. It can be the start." For the first time since the rupture, Megan sensed the possibility of healing. Not fast or easy, but real. Conversations with Claire sparked moments of clarity and courage. Slowly, Megan began to rebuild a fragile sense of self, piecing together fragments of confidence to face what lay ahead. Yet the shadow of unanswered questions about David's sudden departure remained. Late one night, poring through encounters and memories for any clue, Megan stumbled upon a name she hadn't seen for years: Lisa. A name buried deep in David's past. Whispered during a rare argument but swiftly dismissed or forgotten. Could Lisa be the key to unraveling the tangled web of lies? Megan's heart pounded in her chest as hope tangled with fear. To confront the past meant opening old wounds, but perhaps those wounds held the truth she needed to reclaim her future. Vulnerability seeped through her cracks, but now it mingled with an unyielding determination. She was not alone, even if many had turned their backs. Allies had emerged, however unexpected, and with their support, Megan felt the stirrings of strength that could topple walls built by cold betrayal. But danger lingered. The more she began to peel back the layers, the more she sensed resistance waiting in the shadows. Resistance from those who wished to silence her story forever. As Megan prepared to face these challenges, she whispered to herself, a quiet vow in the dark: she would not be broken. Have you ever found hope flickering within your darkest moments? How did you embrace that light and allow it to guide your path forward? Megan's world seemed to spiral into chaos the day the truth shattered the fragile calm she had been cultivating. It began with an unexpected letter arriving at her doorstep, an anonymous note, the paper crisp yet stained with faint smudges, as if handled hastily by someone desperate to keep secrets hidden, but compelled to reveal them. The message was brief but powerful. David wasn't just leaving, he'd been living a lie she'd never suspected. There was a name, Lisa, the woman from his past Megan had stumbled upon by chance at the support group. The note hinted at a connection deeper than mere acquaintance, a secret David had buried under years of silence and falsehood. At first, Megan's hands trembled as she held the letter. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead, and her heart pounded unevenly. It was as if the ground beneath her had cracked open, revealing a chasm of betrayal wider than she could fathom. The bitter truth hit her with staggering force. Her husband's departure had been premeditated, calculated with the precision of someone wanting to erase a life without consequence. Worse still, this revelation exposed the extent of the lies woven around her, unraveling emotions she thought were real. The life they shared, the quiet dinners, the gentle smiles, the shared dreams, all seemed like shadows cast upon a fragile stage. Megan's first instinct was to retreat, to curl into herself and shield against the rising tide of pain and humiliation. The betrayal was a public spectacle, whispered about in every corner of their town, a grotesque display that made her feel utterly exposed. But amid the corrosion of despair, something unexpected flickered, a spark of fierce resilience ignited by the sting of injustice. She refused to be the discarded woman hidden away behind closed doors and legal jargon. Determined, Megan reached out to Lisa, opening a channel of fragile communication. What followed was a conversation layered with trembling voices, withheld tears, and the slow peeling away of years of deception. Lisa, tender and broken in her own right, revealed the tangled story, a past relationship with David, shattered promises, and a secret kept from Megan as David constructed his new life behind her back. It was an act of courage from Lisa, whose own pain mirrored Megan's, that transformed the narrative from one of betrayal to an alliance forged in shared sorrow. David's calculated cruelty became starkly evident as his facade cracked under the pressure. When Megan confronted him with the truth, the coldness in his eyes deepened, but the town's whispers did not spare him. He had underestimated the quiet fire Megan now bore in her soul. Friends and neighbors, once silent or indifferent, began to rally around her as the depth of David's deception surfaced in whispers and sideways glances. They witnessed the woman who had been humiliated and discarded rise with a dignity that stunned them all. Even those who had doubted or judged, she now moved silently to support her, recognizing the strength hidden beneath her vulnerability. From the edge of despair, Megan grasped an unexpected lifeline in truth and unexpected kindness. What began as a moment of utter humiliation became a turning point where the narrative shifted. The victim was no longer invisible, but rising, armed with the secrets David hoped would stay buried. Yet even within this fragile victory, Megan knew the battle was far from over. The legal struggles, the whispers, and the judgments still loomed large. But now, fueled by clarity and the growing support around her, she faced what was to come with a newfound resolve. The shadows that had once consumed her life began to recede as light, however faint, illuminated the path forward. Have you ever discovered a painful truth that changed everything, transforming pain into purpose? How did that moment redefine your journey and awaken unexpected strength? The confrontation with David marked the culmination of months steeped in sorrow, betrayal, and emerging strength. Megan had meticulously gathered every piece of evidence she could find: the anonymous letter, messages exchanged with Lisa, and records of David's secret meetings and hidden accounts. Her lawyer, a steady presence with empathetic eyes, had transformed those fragments into a weapon of truth, ready to pierce David's carefully constructed facade. The day of the legal hearing arrived quiet and tense, a whirlwind of emotions swirling beneath Megan's calm exterior. The small courtroom was cramped, suffocated by the low hum of murmurs and the heavy scent of polished wood and leather-bound books. Megan sat near the front, her fingers entwined tightly, breathing deeply to still the rapid beats of her heart. Across from her, David's stoic posture betrayed little. But the cold glances he cast her way revealed a flicker of unease. As the proceedings unfolded, Megan spoke with a clarity born of pain and purpose. She recounted the years of shared dreams, the sudden cruelty of his abandonment, and the hidden betrayal that shattered her trust. Hers was not just a plea for justice in the legal sense, but a reclamation of her dignity, proof that she was more than the discarded wife he tried to render invisible. Witnesses stepped forward, neighbors who spoke of David's strange behavior, and Lisa, whose testimony laid bare the depth of his deception. The courtroom was silent, taut with tension that clung to the walls like a thick fog. Megan's voice did not waver, even as emotions threatened to flood. In that room, she moved beyond the role of victim. She was a woman transformed, wounded but unbroken, reclaiming her narrative and her power. Outside the courtroom, the town was abuzz with whispers and new respect. Some who had once pitied Megan or assumed her weakness now looked upon her with admiration. The slow shift in perception was a balm to years of quiet pain, proof that resilience could alter even the harshest judgments. David, meanwhile, faced real consequences. The split of assets, the loss of credibility, and the exposure of his lies stripped away the power he once wielded so coldly. For the first time, Megan saw the man who had cast her out reduced to the isolation she had once felt, an uneasy, hollow place. Yet amidst this victory, Megan found something more profound than legal success. She discovered a wellspring of self-respect that no betrayal or humiliation could diminish. The woman who had collapsed into despair was no longer the same. Her soul bore the marks of survival and courage, transforming her into a beacon of hope for others facing similar darkness. At home, Megan began to rebuild not just her life but her identity. She painted the worn walls in warm colors, filled the rooms with light and laughter, and nurtured dreams once shelved away by pain. Her relationships deepened with those who had stood by her, and with new friends who saw her strength. Most importantly, Megan learned to love herself in ways she never had before, embracing vulnerability as a source of power rather than weakness. The road had been long and bruising, but each step forged a woman who refused to be defined by her past or the cruelty inflicted upon her. With every sunrise, Megan felt the promise of a new beginning, a life built on truth, courage, and the unwavering belief that she deserved happiness. Has there been a moment in your life where seizing your truth became the turning point for your own transformation? How did standing firm change the course of your journey? In the soft glow of dawn, Megan sat by the window of her modest home, a place once heavy with silence, now filled with quiet strength and newfound peace. The air was still, carrying the gentle promise of a new day, one she greeted not with fear or hesitation, but with open arms and a heart resilient beyond measure. The journey from the shattering call that ended her marriage to this calm harbor had been nothing short of transformative. Megan had walked through storms of betrayal, moments of deep humiliation, and the agonizing loneliness of being cast aside. But within the depths of that pain, she discovered the unyielding core of her own spirit, a fire that refused to be extinguished by cruelty or abandonment. Surrounded by friends who became chosen family, and empowered by the truths she unearthed, Megan reclaimed her life piece by precious piece. She found joy in the small, everyday moments, the warm scent of fresh coffee, the vibrant colors of autumn leaves scattered across the yard, the laughter shared with those who believed in her. No longer shackled by David's rejection, Megan redefined her identity, not as a discarded wife, but as a woman of grace, courage, and integrity. The scars left by her past remained, quiet reminders of battles fought and won, but they no longer dictated her story. Instead, they stood as badges of strength, symbols of her refusal to be silenced or diminished. Megan's journey illuminated a universal truth, that the deepest wounds can be a source of profound growth, and that justice is not merely the settling of scores, but the restoration of dignity. In honoring herself, she inspired others to see their own worth, even when the world seemed determined to overlook it. Reflecting on all that had shifted, Megan realized the most important lesson was not about her husband's betrayal, it was about rediscovering the power that lay within. A power grounded in self-love, resilience, and the courage to embrace a future uncharted, but full of hope. She whispered softly to the rising sun, "This is only the beginning." Have you ever found strength in your darkest moments and transformed pain into a path toward healing and hope? Remember, no matter how impossible it seems, there is always a dawn waiting to break through the night. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. See you in our next story.